PlayStation sign in. Just sign into your PlayStation account here to sign in. You should get taken to this page where it just says redirect. Once you get to this page, you want to copy the link up here in your clipboard. So copy that to your clipboard and paste that link back into the script and press enter. And then this will give you all of your account information here. So you can see here all of the information including the account ID. So this is the base 64 version of your account ID. We also want the user ID in here as well. So highlight it and then right-click to copy it. And then we're gonna head to this website, will be linked the description to convert it to a hexadecimal number. So we're gonna paste in the number up here, and this will convert it to a hex number. Hex value, so we just want to enter this here on our PS4. This is our account ID right here. So if I go back to my PS4, I can now use this ID and enter it in here. So I'm going to go ahead and type that into my account ID, and then click done. And then that will activate the account using my real PSN account ID. So from there, we can close out of the Apollo Save tool and restart our PS4. So from here, we can go into our settings. We can scroll down and we can head to our remote play connection settings. And then from here, you want to make sure, of course, that Enable Remote Play is selected. And then we can add device, which will give us our code. So if we switch back over to the computer, we're gonna give the official app from Sony a try first of all. So we're gonna open up the Remote Play client, sign into PS and sign in, using the same account that we signed in on when we were grabbing the account ID. Okay, so we've just signed in. That should be good there. I guess we'll confirm and continue. We'll select PS4. Alright, it's gonna try and search for it now. It might find it successfully. If not, you can just click link manually. And that will give you the number that you can enter. So if we go back to the PS4 here, you can see we've got the ID, and we just want to enter that ID in the Remote Play client. So 70, 78, and then for 6. To 3, we'll click link, and there we go, linking your PS4. Modded Warfare connected using Remote Play, and we have Remote Play up and running here on our PS4. Sound is coming through fine. I can use my keyboard to control the console remotely. And there we go, we have Remote Play up and running using the official PlayStation Remote Play app on our 11.0 jailbreak. So that's how you get that up pretty straightforward. So of course, we can also try the open source client. Give this one a shot, so if we enable the Wi-Fi, it should just scan and find the PS4. It's detected here on the network. If it's not detected automatically, you can just click the plus button. Type in the IP address, which was 19.2.1.1.17.3, and then from there we can just click save. And then you can double click. And you want to enter PS for firmware above or equal to 8.00. So the account ID base 64 is gonna be this account ID that we got from the script where it says, this is your account ID. You can just copy it and paste it in here and then the PIN number. Of course. So we'll need to head back to our PS4 again. So that's gonna be 1052 8 register, and there we go, successfully registered. We can double click it. And we now have this Remote Play client working as well. So there is a crackling sound with this open source client that you might be able to hear. There's a couple of fixes I found online. One of them that works well for me. So if you are running into that audio issue with the crackling sound, what you can do to fix that is, if you head into the settings icon here, you can do a couple of things. We should really have the codec on H2 since we're not on a PS5. Also the audio buffer size. You can try increasing this. Default is 9600. You can try increasing this to a higher number, which might get rid of that crackling sound. That did not fix it for me. What fixed it for me was heading into this folder for the open source client, heading to the audio folder and deleting this Windows DLL file that's in here. You basically need to get rid of that. So it's being used right now. So I have to close the program and then delete it. And then once it's deleted, we can then run the open source client again here. And with that now running, we can give this another try and see if that fixes the issue. As oh now there's no audio. Oh no, we do have audio, it's just delayed. So it's a bit delayed. So to reduce the delay, you can reduce the buffer size. So if you reduce it down to about 4,000, it shouldn't be too bad of a delay. So we'll set it to 4,000 and now that should hopefully be fixed. Let's give this another try. Yep. So no more crackling audio. So that's how you get that there in the open source client. Now a couple of other things to mention. If to jailbreak the PS4 on 11.0, you have to use the Ethernet cable with PO. Now there are some solutions, like the Raspberry Pi solution that can give you internet access once it successfully jailbroke the console through the Ethernet port. But if you're using a separate internet connection like Wi-Fi, once you've successfully run the jailbreak, then you're not really gonna be able to remote play when you're running the jailbreak. So therefore, you're gonna wanna have the console already jailbroken before you're wanting to use remote play, and then just put the console into rest mode. Recover from rest mode whenever you want to access remote play on your PS4, instead of turning the console off. So you can do that by going into your Gold 10 settings, and then going to the settings option, and making sure enable rest mode support is ticked. And then on this open source remote play client, when you go to close it, it should be set here to ask you if you want to put the console into sleep mode or not. So that way, when you're done using remote play and you want your console to power down, you can just say yes and it will put it into rest mode. And then it basically sends a wake-up packet to the console whenever you want to connect again with the remote play. And that should allow it to recover from rest mode with the jailbreak still running, so you can continue using it. And then, if you just want to disconnect temporarily and connect again, you don't have to put it into rest mode. You can just say no, and you should be good to just reopen it again and regain access. So I could end the video here, however. Let's take things one step further. What if you want to be able to access remote play over the internet, not just on the local network? So if you're out somewhere and you want to be able to access your local network, access your PS4 when you're not at home, you're not within your local network, how do we do that? Now, you can access it from the outside by setting up like a VPN on your router, and then having any device that wants to access remote play when you're not at home can access that VPN and then access the PS4 that way. That's one way to do it, although not all routers support VPNs, of course. So the other way is just to open the ports on your router and access it via the public IP address, so I'll show you guys how to do that real quick. So first of all, to access it over the internet, we're gonna need to grab our public IP address. So if I go to the website, whatismyipaddress.com, this will give you your public IP address. So for all the people who have always said you leaked your IP address in previous videos, where I was just showing a local IP address, you actually have a point for once. So yeah, anyway, if we go ahead and copy our public IP address here, what we're gonna do is then log into our router. Now, port forwarding is different depending on what router you have. All makes and models of routers set up their port forwarding slightly differently, so you can use a website like portforward.com. I'll leave this resource down in the video description. You can go to routers and then list of routers. This will give you a big list of different brands of routers that are available in different models. You can select a model that you have and then try and find it in here. And maybe your exact version doesn't exist, but there might be a similar router version here that you can select. And then it gives you a detailed breakdown on how to log into your router, what the default gateway address is most likely to be, and then exactly how you can figure out how to actually port forward. What settings on the router you need to go into in order to port forward for your specific router. So I'll leave that down in the video description. In my case, I need to go to 19.to.dot.1.1, which is the default gateway of my router. And that will take me over here. I don't know why it's zoomed in so much. There we go, so log into your router, and then for me, I need to head down to the when section on this ASUS router. And then I'm gonna head to virtual server / port forwarding. And then from here, I can add a profile. And the service name is gonna be PS4 Remote Play and Protocol. So the ports that you wanna open, it's gonna be 9 to 9.5 for TCP and then 9.2. 9.6 and 9 to 9.7 for UDP. So if your router supports opening ports for both TCP and UDP, I would just select both and then you can just do 9. 295 to 9 to 9.7. So that's a port range between 9.2, 95AND9 to 97, and then for the internal
that's gonna
IP
be the
address of my PS4, which is 1.173, and that is essentially how you get that set up. We can click OK. Then I can turn on port forwarding, so let's give this a try. If we go back onto our open source client here, we can add a new host, and I'm gonna paste in the public IP address. So this is over the internet, not on my local network this time. So we'll add that.
Double click.
We'll do the same thing where we're gonna first of all add our ID, our account ID entered in here, and then the PIN number. We're gonna add our device here, so
for
0, 4, and then 3, 9. 5 for so we'll register, and there we go, registered successfully. So the ports have been successfully opened, because that is accessing it over the internet. Because I'm using the public IP address, so it would not normally work if the ports were closed. So let's try and double click on this. It might be a bit laggier because it is over the internet, but no. It's actually responding quite well. So looks like we're all good there, okay. So now we can access it over the internet. But there's still two potential problems, which is that this might only be temporary. Because if you don't have a static IP address for your public IP, and that it's gonna change in a few days, and then you're not gonna be able to access your PS4 remotely from outside your network. And then also, if you're using a dynamic IP address for the local IP of the PS4 as well, then the port forwarding is also gonna break when the IP address changes on your PS4. So those are two problems. So let me just quickly go over how we can address both of those issues. So for example, on my router, I can pretty easily just go into the LAN section on my router. And then if I go to the DHCP server, there is an option here for me to manually assign IP addresses around the DHCP list, which should allow me to basically assign my PS4 a static IP address. You can do this on the PS4 itself. Just set up a static IP address and make sure it's one that the router is not using for any other devices. I can do it on my router so that it will always assign my PS for the same IP. So with this, I can just say, hey, take my PS4, so this is the MAC address of my PS4, I guess. Take that PS4 and then assign it this IP address 1.173 and make sure that it always assigns that IP address. So that way my PS4 is never gonna change to another IP address. So the ports will always be forwarded for my PS4 for remote play. So that is one fix right there for the LAN IP address changing, okay. So the final issue is, if you have a dynamic address for your public IP address, so your public IP address changes every so often, which mine does. I wouldn't be willing to show you the public IP address right here. And I would obviously not be showing you that if it wasn't dynamic. So if you do have public IP address that changes, then you know that's a problem. Because what's gonna happen when the IP address changes, and you still have the old IP address in your remote play settings, you'll have to update it every single time. It's not ideal. So the way around that is you can call your internet service provider and ask them to give you a static IP address. That's instead an option, but sometimes they charge you extra for that. So what you can do instead is use a dynamic DNS service. So in my case, my router actually supports this built-in. So it's got the DNS, which is dynamic DNS. So I can select this option. I can enable it, already got it entered here. So PS4 Remote Play.access.com. And I can set this for no certificate, and I can just click apply. So this will give me a hostname, which is gonna be ps4rp.access.com, and then the root. Every time my IP address changes, it will update that hostname with the new IP every single time automatically for me. So that way, if my IP address changes, it's no problem. I can just use this hostname instead of the IP address to access remote play. So just to show what that looks like, if we try and access remote play with this, we'll click plus, we'll add it as RPS for rp.access.com, and then we'll enter our device ID again. Register, and there we go. You can see it worked, so it's now using the access.com address instead of the public IP address. And so every time the IP address changes, my router will update the DNS to with the new IP address, so that I will always be able to access it using this ps4rp.access.com. I'll always be able to access it that way. So that is essentially how you can kind of solve that problem. Now, what if your router doesn't have a dynamic DNS option built in? Which a lot of routers are not going to have. Well, you can use a free service like DuckDNS to do this for you. So essentially, DuckDNS free dynamic DNS hosted on AWS. You can set this up. You can basically sign in with your Google account, enter your public IP address, and enter a domain name that you want to use. And then it will be something at dns.org, and you can have like ps4rp.duckdns.org. And then that will be the address. And then in order to update the public IP address, it changes if you go to the install option. There's lots of different things. So you can find any device on your network that you run 24/7. You can basically run a script that will update the IP address on the DNS every time it changes. So there's one for Linux and there's one for Windows GUI. There's a Mac OS version, there's a version for OpenWrt routers, Fritzbox routers, DDWRT routers, Technicolor Sense, Freenas, and all of that stuff. So if you have any of those devices or any device that runs Linux, for example, that you just run 24/7, a home server, NAS, anything that you're running on your network constantly, you can use that to update the DNS with the new IP address every time it changes. And then you can have your PS4 Remote Play.dns.com that you can use to access remote play over the internet. So yeah, anyway, that's basically it. That is how you can get the remote play set up on your local network, as well as a good solution for accessing it over the internet. And I know the quality doesn't look great on here right now, but you can of course edit that. You can increase the bitrate. I've just got it set to the automatic setting. You can change it from 60 FPS to 30. You can also up the resolution to 1080p if you have a PS4 Pro. You know, if you have a regular PS4, I think it's limited to 720. But there you go, that's better, nice and sharp now. So anyway, that's it for this video. I know it was maybe a little bit complicated and a little long, so I'm curious whether you guys, I kind of appreciate that. Or if you'd rather I do a kind of more simplistic guide that just shows the very basics, which should just be a quick, because you can get remote play up and running in 5 minutes. But you know, if you want to go the extra mile, get it working over the internet, and deal with issues like having a dynamic IP address, then you know, obviously it takes a little bit longer to cover all of that stuff. Let me know what you think. So hope you guys enjoyed this one or find the information useful. If you did, please leave a like and subscribe, and I'll hopefully see you